Read the slides, you can enjoy the images as well. So we've been hearing a lot about what is climate change, the impact of climate change, what is happening about climate change, which has led us to the conclusion that climate litigation is on the rise everywhere, including Pakistan. And that means that climate change cases will be in your courtrooms, will be there for you to deal with very soon, if you haven't already dealt with them. These cases are cases that come against public authorities, private entities, and corporations. But there is one fundamental difference between cases of climate change and the environment. And that is something that you have to think about, which is basically climate change cases see no boundaries. There is no jurisdiction. It's not that the cause of action will arise within your jurisdiction. So this leads to a very big problem, and that is for the court to see who is responsible to pay for the damage? Who am I going to hold liable for the damage? How to calculate the damages, and what will be the relief? Now, there's no book, there's no statute that you can just open and find all the answers. This is years of jurisprudence which has evolved and developed. And as Amir has said, these cases are there for you to read and for you to use and cite them and see how to build them into your own judgments, because these are the cases that have opened the doors to climate law, climate justice, climate rights. And this is how we will have to look at climate rights in the context of human rights so that we can start addressing the problem. Now, we must remember fundamentally that judges cannot solve the climate crisis. Judges have a role to play, and that role is to protect the rights of the people and to push a narrative which brings the climate change narrative into the forefront. So what is it that you can do as a judge? What is it that you can do, and what role can you play? You can identify rights and duties. You can state what action is required. You can prompt the required action. And you can push for policy and legislation if and where it is required. And while trying to look for these solutions, next slide please. While trying to look for these solutions, you have to balance the rights with sustainable development. You can look at the human right angle. You can look at international law, treaty obligations, think about what rights are at stake, look for climate resilient solutions, which means look for solutions which will help the climate, not aggravate the situation. You can borrow principles from the environmental jurisprudence, and most important, something that we've heard since morning, you can push for enforcement. We have the framework, we have the policy, there are the laws, you have international law and commitments, but you have to push for enforcement. So let's just go through a few cases. It's more like a walk through some of the judgments to see how the courts have dealt with it. So the famous Asghar Laghari case from our famous judge who's sitting here. This was a case brought by a farmer to say that my right to life is being affected by the fact that the government is not following its climate law and it's not following its climate policy. There's drought, my agriculture is suffering, I don't have water, and my quality of life is suffering. And now the court has this very obscure question before it. So what does the court do? How does the court address this question? Next slide. The court makes a commission. So this is a judicial tool that it has used. It forms a commission. It brings all the stakeholders into that commission. You have members from various parts of the government, you have experts there, you have science people there, you have members from the community there, you have a whole lot of experts there who've been put together and have been told, now think about the problem and tell me what can we do as a court, what can it do, how to give relief to this farmer who has come to the court. And so what are the powers that the court gave to the commission? That you can call anyone you want, you can co-opt them, and you can also call the government and see which ministry, which department you need some help from. Now what is it that the commission did? The commission then broke itself down into committees. It collected information, it collected data, it collected reports from the experts, and it tried to see what is the way forward. Ultimately, the commission gave a solution to the court, and the court put that solution, that recommendation into motion. And what did that what came about was a climate change new law, an updated policy, and a bigger and a better commitment to work within a framework so that the Asghar Laghari who came to court would not come to court again, because there would be answers and there would be responses to his problem. Now, how does this judicial tool help you? It sort of standardizes the process, it structures it, it brings all the experts together, it creates data and information, and most important, the right people who have to think about the issues are thinking about it and present a solution to the court, which then is implemented. So this is a good tool to use. It's been used in environment cases, and this is a tool that has been used in the Asghar Laghari case, which ultimately brought about, in fact, I would say even the Ministry for Climate Change, because until Asghar Laghari, there was no Ministry for Climate Change. And maybe this case is what highlighted the fact that you need a ministry to deal with these issues. Next slide, please. Another way, what I had said earlier, was that a tool that courts can use is that you identify rights and you push for enforcement. So I will highlight how the court has done this through 3 different cases. The first case is the one that Rafi mentioned, a CDA-related case, which was simply a case asking for the change in the status of the property from residential to commercial. And actually, the court could have just answered the prayer of the litigant there and said, all right, there you go, you have your case, your property is now going to be converted. But the court didn't stop there. It put on the environment lens, but said, hang on, I need to do something more, something bigger. So it came up with this new helmet with multi-visions on it. This very highly technical helmet which had multiple visions in it. It put that on and said, if I let you make this property commercial, there are going to be problems at multiple levels. Congestion, traffic, increased human activity, businesses. What am I going to do? Who's going to attend to all those problems? And how are those going to be seen? When the court saw that solutions were not forthcoming, or it looked complicated, so it said, why don't you use zoning laws? So you see, pushing enforcement, use zoning laws, because this is a good public management tool. Use zoning laws. Now these are very complicated cases, complicated judgments. I'm just making it easy to show you what are the tools that the court has been using. Next, please. In another case, which had to do with surface mining and which had to do with licensing, in fact, Rafe was the lawyer in that, the issue was all about the pollution that was being caused, the health hazards that were being called, and the fact that the authority was not taking enough initiative and action. So here, once again, the court looked at the problem, dealt with it, but then again put on that helmet with the multi-level, multi-layers of vision, high-tech science fiction soche, helmet pehni, and you can just about see through layers and layers of levels at what you have to see things. And the court put that on and said, wait a second, you might have a climate policy at a national level, but you should think about making policies at a sector level. So a good policy, climate resilient mining policy, will help address some of the concerns that have been brought to the court. The court also said you already have existing tools. You have the IEE and the EIA. Why don't you make an environment management schedule in that? Place duties and obligations in that, create timelines, and start monitoring that process. So you're pushing for enforcement. You don't need new laws, you don't need new ways, you just need to get them to do what is required to do. Why? Because in the end, you're protecting that right to life, that right to health. You're protecting that business as well. You want that business to continue, but it has to continue in a way which is environment friendly. The third case, next slide please. The third case is related to a custom matter. It was a very simple issue about import duties on hybrid electric vehicles. Now, hybrid electric vehicles are battery-operated cars, and the court looked at all of this, heard the case, and said, why are you stressing so much on the custom duty and on how much money you can extract from these people? Why don't you focus on the fact that this import should be increased? So once again, that helmet with the multi-visions comes on, and that helmet starts looking at how this is in line with the government's climate policy, that it goes towards building a resilient society as a resilient solution, that you're bringing in more and more electric vehicles, which is what you want. And so once again, the court has stepped beyond what it's looking at, and that was just limited to the tax issue, the custom duty issue, but started focusing on the impact of the issue before it. Next, please. Now, another tool that has been used in cases is community participation. And community participation is one of my favorites. I think it's vital to have the community participate in different whatever projects are being done, get their opinion, because at the end of the day, whatever is being done for their benefit. So you must know whether what you're doing is actually going to work for them. So next slide, please. This tool was used in the Sartaj Haider case, which relates to the floods in Sindh. And what happened in this case was that a lot of flood affectees went to the Sindh High Court to say that we are not being given enough relief work. There's no relief work coming our way. It's not sufficient, or it's not enough, or it's not even giving us what we really need. And the court, the High Court, made a citizens committee. It brought members of the community together, and they said, all right, please participate in the relief efforts. Have a look at what's going on and let them know wherever things are going wrong. And so this goes to the fact that everyone so far, it's in the morning 2 sessions, have said that it must go down to the local level. So here you have the local people participating through these citizen committees. The matter came to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court looked at these committees and said, very good, this is very good, continue using the Citizens Committee, but then went a step further and said, in your disaster management plan, you must encourage this citizen participation. And then one step further to say that in these disaster management committees that you have at every level, from the federal down to the tehsil, you must include women. You must include vulnerable groups, because women are most affected by climate change. And you want to bring these marginalized groups along with the gender into these decision-making processes, because otherwise they get left out. They get left out, their voices are not heard, and the whole purpose for what you are working on, that kind of gets negated. Now, how does this, next please, how does this help, this community participation? It creates gives the government more insight, it creates participation, it allows vulnerable groups to have a voice to participate, and most important, it gives effectiveness to the actual role that you are playing. Now, please note that these are things that the court has thought of. The court has said that this is what I can do to make the process better, to humanize the efforts, to make sure that the ultimate objective of the law is achieved. Next. Now, this is another one, a public-private partnership. And this is important when we think about funds and money and how the government doesn't necessarily always have funds available to do things. So you move money from the private sector into the public sector to allow the private sector to support the public sector in its climate resilient policies. Next, please. 2 cases to illustrate this. This first case has to do with drinking water. An entire village came to the court and said that we don't get clean drinking water, and there doesn't seem to be any effort in getting us clean drinking water. And the government said that, well, we are working on it, there's a project, but it will take time. The funds have to come through and so on. So now there was a problem. You couldn't wait for the funds to come, the project to materialize, and then people be given drinking water, because the right to water is a fundamental right. So the court created this public-private partnership. And through this public-private partnership, the villagers participated with the government, and they formed a small, sort of like a pool of money from which they started doing a very simple thing, boring, deep boring, so that they could have drinking water until the government project could be materialized. And in fact, this village project was so successful that it was then carried out, I'm told, in many other villages in order to achieve the basic objective, to provide clean drinking water. Next. Now, sometimes, like I said, you get public-private partnerships, you provide for solutions, and sometimes you need to provide for interim solutions. Next. An interim solution, again, another case where Garbage was being dumped on land next to the plaintiff's or the petitioner's land, and he said that I can't, my agriculture is suffering, all the toxins are going into the land, the quality of the soil is going bad, apart from the health hazards and the breathing issues that are being created, because this has become the village dump yard and everyone's dumping their garbage right next to my property. Once again, the government said, yes, we know, we are working on garbage disposal projects, it will take time, the money will come through, and so on. So what we needed was, you said this wouldn't go off.
No, I said it will go off after 15 minutes.
What the government again came and said was that we need time. Now, you can't have someone living in such bad conditions, again, health hazard, the right to life is affected. So an interim solution, the court said, come up with an interim solution, try to see what you can do with this dumping area and see what can come out of it, see what you can do. So with the participation of the community, an interim disposal system was set up until the actual the project was to materialize. And so that way the problem was dealt with, the litigant was able to get the relief that he wanted, and we are not just sitting and waiting for the funds to come, for the projects to be materialized. Next, please. And this, the last kind of tool that has been used by courts, and in fact is very popular, are calling for rolling reports. That is, whenever you feel you don't have enough information before you, you call for reports, you call for information. It was used in the flood case, it was used, and in fact I think the case is still pending, in a case related to deforestation in Sindh, where the court is constantly calling for reports and information. And what is the benefit of this? Next slide, please. That you get the information that you want. Number two, it creates data. Number three, you can keep monitoring the process. Number four, this is important, wherever decisions are being made with respect to what you're calling reports for, there is a thinking process now that's going on, and that thinking process is documented, because they have to come and tell you, this is why we've taken these decisions, and this is how we're going to do it. Now, these are just some of the ways in which the courts have thought out of the box, thought out of the routine way of thinking, looked at the cases with a larger perspective to see how they can provide solutions. And this is important because this is the only way to deal with climate change cases, that you have to be a little innovative, a little creative. Last slide, please. So as judges, what can you do? Well, you can update yourself. Keep reading, keep yourself updated. We have a website which we've populated with information, but there are a lot of programs out there, documentaries out there. Keep reading and keep updating yourself on what's happening. Think about future generations. Think about the Pakistan you want to leave for future generations, and think about the planet and how you want to leave it behind, because after all, they will one day grow up, our children and their children, and say, you know, what is this air that you've left behind for me, and I don't even have water to drink. And most important, you can now start looking at how other jurisdictions are doing their work. You know, you can look at other cases, they're all available online. You can have a look and see how do other jurisdictions deal with similar problems. So it's a little bit of effort, but it goes a long way. So in the end, all that I'd like to say to all of you, last slide please, is think climate, think rights, create solutions. Together let us craft solutions that protect the planet and its people. Thank you.